Part 29. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mocienu. Chapter 281. Dear awakened lord, welcome to the divine continent. As a gentle female voice sounded in her ears, Miu slowly opened her eyes. What came into view turned out to be a vast plain grassland. The flowers are in bloom and the green fields are shady, making people feel like they are in a jungle wilderness at a glance. In front of Miu stood a girl with a good figure and a charming face. The girl is wearing a light green dress, with fair skin, blonde hair and blue eyes, pointed ears, and a pair of transparent wings behind her. It seems that this girl is actually a beautiful elf. Honorable Lord Awakener, I am your guide Lucy. The linkage device has been bound to your special energy. Once confirmed, the account cannot be changed. Are you sure? The sweet voice of the elf girl who called herself the guide reached Miu's ears. At the same time, a subtitle appeared in the air in front of Miu. Please confirm to bind your initial account. The elf girl who suddenly stood up and the huge subtitles that appeared in front of her eyes did not frighten Miu in the slightest. He turned a deaf ear to the urging of the girl in front of him. Miu lowered her head and looked around, then spread her hands to observe the changes in her body. The fragrance of flowers and plants comes from the tip of the nose, the flowing air blows across the skin, and the chirping of birds can be heard faintly in the ears. Everything seems so real and natural. Miu noticed that his soul incarnation was wearing a white practice uniform. Really? The moment she entered the game world, Miu confirmed a certain guess in her heart. Unlike ordinary people, he was not wearing that gaming helmet. It is the soul energy that controls the split soul pulling spiritual linkage device. It turns out that without wearing a helmet, Miu has indeed entered the game. And this completely verified Miu's conjecture. The key that connects the virtual world and the real channel is not the helmet touching the five senses of human beings, but the human soul energy. Everyone has their own unique soul energy. In comparison, the souls of awakened people are obviously more powerful than those of ordinary humans. And that helmet-shaped spiritual linkage device is what draws and absorbs human souls, blinding human perception with an existence similar to the illusion of the soul. It achieves the effect of traveling through time and space, as if being in another world. In Miu's eyes, this so-called God's continent in the game is an illusory space built with huge soul power. After understanding the operating principle of virtual space, Miu focused her gaze on the void light curtain in front of her. Please confirm to bind your initial account. Miu stretched out her finger and clicked the confirm button below. The next second, the light curtain flickered with a white light and disappeared before Miu's eyes. Congratulations to the awakened master for the successful binding. Now please tell Lucy your name. Another window popped up in front of Miu. Without hesitation, Miu slid her fingertips and slowly wrote Chiu on the waistcoat. A text frame suddenly appeared above Miu's head. It says Chiu, LV1. And when Miu wrote down her title, the elf girl Lucy's face immediately showed a smile. Honorable Lord Chiu, the divine continent is an open world where various races coexist. Here you can enjoy the adventure of breaking through levels and advancing. You can also experience a beautiful lifelike reality in the living area. Complete different achievement tasks and you will also receive game titles and real-life rewards. The sweet voice of the elf girl echoed in Miu's ears. It is worth reminding you that although you will not actually die if you are killed in the game, there is a certain chance that the equipment you are wearing will be dropped. So, please cherish every life you have. After a short novice tutorial, Miu also understood that this world is nothing more than a continuation of the style of online games. Players can choose their favorite race from 12 initial professions. Each race has its own unique abilities, such as the most common berserkers, magicians, dwarves, orcs. The entire God's Domain continent has a total of 100 floors, and each floor has a corresponding boss level. Players can clear levels by forming groups, and the first team after defeating the boss will receive generous rewards. Some of these rewards are in-game equipment, while others are real-life items. After some introductions, the elf girl Lucy said, "Distinguished Lord Awakener, based on your special status, I now provide you with an opportunity to draw a special race. The extracted race will refer to your real-life abilities." When Mewtwo heard this, she burst out laughing. It seems that even in this virtual game world, the awakened ones have their own privileges. This is in line with the style of Zilan base. Ordinary survivors from the outside world can only choose careers from the 12 initial races. After the elf girl finished speaking, a glowing golden roulette suddenly appeared in the sky. The names of professions are engraved on the roulette wheel. But these fonts seem to be obscured by a layer of clouds, making it difficult to see them clearly. The next second, the roulette wheel began to rotate rapidly, and all the fonts on it were completely blurred. Mewtwo, on the other hand, squinted her eyes slightly, not focusing on the roulette wheel at all, with a thoughtful expression. After a few seconds, the pointer on the surface of the golden roulette wheel pointed in a direction. "Congratulations, you have obtained a rare profession, the Magician Clan, the Mad War Priest." A look of joy appeared on the face of the elf girl Lucy. He jumped on his toes, his face flushed, and he looked even more excited than Mewtwo. Looking back at Mewtwo, she had a normal and indifferent expression. It seems that he is completely uninterested in this profession that has made countless civilian players salivate. "Next, please accept your profession." As the huge roulette wheel slowly dissipated, a golden token floated in the air. "The job transfer token contains your professional skills and exclusive tasks, please accept it." The golden token is right in front of you, and faint soul energy is faintly exuding from it. Feeling the empty energy in her body, Mewtwo chuckled and shook her head. Logically speaking, even the souls of these players are in the fantasy space. But the powerful awakened one should always feel something unusual. Especially those awakened ones with soul-related abilities. Living in the illusion space should also have considerable strength. But according to Mao Yuming, the initial level of all humans after entering the game world is level 1. And the strength is also fixed at the same level according to different occupations. There is only one truth. The illusion space uses a method similar to psychological suggestion to suppress the soul abilities of these awakened people. Mewtwo stretched out her hand and snapped her fingers. Just listen to a loud click sound, as if some bottleneck has been broken. Mewtwo's whole body suddenly erupted with a powerful soul pressure. The majestic soul energy surged out like a stormy wave, sweeping through this illusory space in an instant. At the same time, Mewtwo's momentum continued to rise. The most intuitive manifestation is that the level in the frame above Mewtwo's head is rapidly rising. LV1, LV30, LV66, LV88, LV100, LV. As the coercion in the space becomes more violent, the level frame above Mewtwo's head could not withstand the powerful soul energy, and it soared from green to dangerous red. The next second, a loud click sound echoed from the space. Countless players who have never conquered the full level frame day and night suddenly find themselves at this moment, broken. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 282. The entire space was instantly thrown into chaos by the huge soul energy gushing out of Mewtwo. The sky instantly turned dark red, the grass on the plain turned yellow, and the howling of some creatures came from the depths of the earth. The elf girl Lucy, who was standing not far away, was pale and panicked. Standing in place, she kept screaming. "Warning, warning, an unknown virus has invaded. Warning, warning." What's even more terrifying is that the elf girl's face gradually became hideous. Even the sweet voice at the beginning gradually turned into a cold mechanical sound. The system is about to collapse, about to collapse. The next second, this illusionary space woven by soul energy was invaded by mutu's pressure. Finally, it was difficult to maintain the stability of the space. The earth collapsed, the sky fell, the sun and the moon were reversed, and the horror of the scene was like the end of the world. During the collapse of the illusion space, Muchu, the instigator of everything, stood on a huge rock. Hands in pockets, the broken hair on his forehead covered his expression, and the majestic soul energy around him continued to overflow. When the broken stones fell, only a faint smile could be seen on the corner of his mouth. At the last moment of the collapse of the soul space, Muchu controlled the soul fragment to transform into a soul fragment and dived into the depths of the illusion. Even Muchu did not expect that his overflowing soul energy directly shattered the illusion space he was in. At the same time, the system under collapse automatically maintained, forming a series of chain reactions. All players in the game were forced to log off at this moment. This is the first time that players have been forced to log out of this game world in a virtual illusion since its birth. For a while, the players who were expelled from the game talked about it in the real world, not understanding the real purpose of this system maintenance. At the same time, a high-rise building towering into the sky is located in the central area of Zilan base. In a laboratory in the absolute restricted area of the central area, the terminal brain building. In the operation room full of high-tech equipment, dangerous alarms sounded loudly. The red color of the warning sign occupied the computer screen of the entire laboratory. Several staff members frantically operated in front of the computer screen with flexible fingers, their expressions were frozen and panicked. At this moment, the door of the laboratory suddenly opened. I saw a sick man in a white coat and a melancholy temperament walked in from outside. "What's going on?" The man's face was pale, and even his voice was weak with a sense of terminal illness. In front of the console, a staff member replied. "Just now, a virus of unknown origin was found to attack the system space from the inside, causing the server to crash completely." The sick man's pale face was red, and he asked in a hoarse voice. "What's wrong with the server system now?" "Part of the system has fallen into a short crash and is trying to repair itself." "Can you determine where this virus is?" The staff member frantically operated in front of the big screen and shook his head. "The source of this virus is unclear, but the last place it appeared is in the ominous abyss." Hearing the name of ominous abyss, the sick man frowned immediately. "Abyss? Is it the virus in the abyss?" The sick man seemed to remember something and nodded to the staff. "Assist the system to complete the repair work as soon as possible." He turned around and left the laboratory. The sick man shuttled through the technological passage, and various scientific research robots appeared from time to time beside him. Finally, the man came to a tall and heavy mechanical door. The sick man in a white coat placed his palm on the scanner beside him, and a unique energy was released. In an instant, the heavy door made of unknown metal opened automatically. In the vast and huge laboratory, countless strange experimental instruments stood on the side. In the deepest part of the laboratory, there stood a huge culture dish hundreds of meters high. Dozens of thick pipes input green liquid from the instruments beside. In the end, all these transformation liquids were put into a human brain in the huge culture dish. "My lord, the existence in the abyss rioted again, and the staff judged it as a virus." This riot had a great impact, and even interfered with the operation of the entire game. When the sick man said this, his tone was still weak, but it was more respectful. After a while, a cold mechanical voice was heard from all directions of the laboratory. "Soon, the virus will be eliminated by the combat troops themselves." Hearing this, the sick man nodded, with a decisive look in his eyes. The existence at the bottom of the abyss has always been a cancer in their eyes. "And sir, the resistance army has been active recently, and has disrupted our actions many times. Do you think our plan should be put on the agenda as soon as possible?" Mu-Chiu's soul drifted to another space in the virtual world with the soul fragments. Feeling that the surrounding soul energy was no longer affected by his violent breath, Mu-Chiu controlled the soul fragment to slowly reveal its body. When Mu-Chiu appeared in another space, the scene in front of him was somewhat different from what he imagined. The vast world of blue sea and blue sky that he thought he would see did not appear. What appeared in front of Mu-Chiu was an extremely strange and cold space. The whole world in front of him was extremely gray. The sky was covered by huge dark clouds, and Mu-Chiu was standing on the edge of the cliff at this moment. Not far in front of him, there was a huge and gloomy palace. From a distance, the terrifying and gloomy palace looked like the huge head of a demon. There was a dead silence around, and the atmosphere was particularly depressing. Even the air seemed to stop flowing here. When Mu-Chiu's eyes came into contact with these scenes, a system light screen suddenly flashed above his head. God's Domain Continent, 100th floor, ominous abyss. Roar. At this moment, the sky in the distance was shrouded by a huge shadow. As the piercing roar came from far to near. Only when you get closer can you see the huge monster that covers the sky and the sun. A huge body like a giant lizard, two bat-like wings behind it, a huge tail with thorns, and a row of fangs on the head. This is actually the appearance of a Western dragon. The terrifying dragon appeared majestically on the top of the palace, with its wings spread out behind it. A pair of red eyes stared directly at Mu-Chiu, and the tyranny in his eyes was daunting. The wailing of the dead souls came from the dim land under the palace, as if responding to the power of the lord of this palace. At this moment, the light curtain in front of Mu-Chiu changed again. Unknown Abyss Final Boss, Abyss Dragon LV-100. It was not until now that Mu-Chiu realized that the soul fragment had actually brought him directly to the final level of this game. And the dragon in front of him was the final boss of this game. The full-level Abyss Dragon. Seeing this, Mu-Chiu pinched his nose subconsciously. Is the difficulty of his novice mission a bit too high? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 283. Ominous Abyss, the forbidden area of life in the Divine Realm continent, where the dead and evil spirits go to the Pure Land. According to legend, any living being that enters the ominous land will become a member of the Pure Land. Abyss Dragon, a terrifying existence from the mysterious abyss. After descending to the Divine Realm continent for unknown reasons, it became the strongest magical beast that oppressed the continent. It now exists in the Dragon Palace at the deepest part of the ominous abyss. Abyss Dragon, LV-100. Mu-Chiu looked at the light screen that appeared in his eyes, and his eyes showed emotion. He had to admit that the system in this game was much more responsible than his own clock-in system. He didn't even need to speak, and he had already informed him of the current situation one by one. Before Mu-Chiu finished his sigh, a strong pressure with a cold breath like from the netherworld came to his face. Roar. The dark abyss dragon obviously also noticed Mu-Chiu's existence. A pair of red pupils stared at the white figure on the cliff, and a deafening roar came out of his mouth. Mu-Chiu clearly felt that there was a dragon's might hidden in this monster that looked like a Western dragon. And on the top of the dragon's head, a full red blood bar could be vaguely seen. The abyss dragon roared to the sky, its limbs shook the ground, and a pair of black wings covering the sky behind it swept up a large area of strong wind. It seemed to be swearing its sovereignty, and there was a condensed murderous intent in the momentum. The next second, the deep earth was shaken and full of cracks. In these cracks that could not be seen at a glance, a group of skeleton soldiers with white skeletons climbed out. These soldiers had a faint light in their eye sockets, some wearing armor, and some holding weapons. Countless skeleton soldiers crawled out of the cracks in the underworld, and the cold and bone-chilling sound echoed, just like a scene of an army of undead. In an instant, a large number of skeleton soldiers launched a fierce attack on Muchu on the cliff. These skeletons are huge and hard, and ordinary weapons can't hurt them at all. Manipulating the swords, bows, and crossbows with cold light, the speed is extremely fast. Even in the real world, these skeleton soldiers are far from being comparable to ordinary zombie heretics. On the ominous wasteland of the forbidden area of living beings, groups of white skeletons are rushing towards the white figure on the cliff. Looking at the skeleton army getting closer and closer to him, Muchu stood there like he was scared. On the light screen in front of him, red light screens kept flashing subtitles of levels ranging from LV 60-70. The cold wind from the underworld blew across the scattered hair on Muchu's forehead, and a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Suddenly, the cliff under Muchu's feet suddenly cracked. With the roar of the dead soul, a skeleton giant with a huge skeleton and a body covered with silver armor rushed out from the ground. LV 79, Skeleton Knight. The moment the huge body of the skeleton knight appeared, a red font flashed on the light screen in front of Muchu. The skeleton knight held a big sword, let out an unknown roar, and slashed at Muchu's head. The next second, the ground where Muchu was immediately chopped and collapsed by the big sword. But Muchu's figure suddenly disappeared from the spot. The skeleton knight's head tilted, and the big sword in his hand also stopped for a moment. But the next second, Muchu's figure appeared in the wilderness not far from the skeleton knight. The ice blue mist in Muchu's hand rippled, and gradually condensed into a dark blue ice spear. Raising his hand, the sharp ice spear in Muchu's hand flew out like a javelin. The spear pierced through the hollow chest and abdomen of the skeleton knight with lightning speed. But the next second, the extreme coldness went straight into the skeleton knight's armor along the spear. There were a series of crisp crackling sounds, and large pieces of ice spread all over the skeleton knight's body. The next moment, the skeleton knight, who was frozen into ice, was shattered into pieces of ice crystals. In just a few breaths, this terrifying monster that was enough to be a boss at another level was killed by Muchu. At the moment when the skeleton knight disappeared, a large number of skeleton soldiers appeared around Muchu. Muchu teleported to the wasteland, but was also surrounded by countless skeletons and bones. Countless skeleton warriors rushed up waving swords, axes, sticks and swords. There were also various skeleton monsters launching the most violent attacks on Muchu. The wail of the dead was coming out of his mouth, and he was about to drown Muchu in this wasteland of bones and turn him into part of the remains of the dead. The screams and groans of the dead ghosts were heard from all directions, and the desperate attacks of countless skeletons were close at hand. But this time Muchu's figure did not move. The next moment, a burst of extreme cold air suddenly broke out around Muchu. Muchu bowed slightly, and a ball of ice blue light on his right palm suddenly slapped the ground under his feet. Polar frozen. In an instant, a large area of icy cold air followed Muchu and invaded in all directions. Wherever the cold air passed, the wasteland turned into a piece of ice. In the blink of an eye, the barren and ominous wasteland turned into an extremely icy wilderness. Even the skeleton army on the wasteland was frozen into ice by this netherworld-like cold air. In the unknown forbidden land of living beings, a horrifying scene is happening. With the figure in white as the center, the crystal blue ice continued to spread in all directions along the ground veins. Wherever the ice passed, all the skeletons and everything were frozen. The abyss dragon in the distance hovered over the palace, feeling the extreme cold coming from below, and its red pupils trembled slightly. After the cold swept through, only Muchu was left standing in the iceberg cold land. Around Muchu, bright crystals could be seen everywhere. These were the weapons and equipment that exploded after the corpse monsters were destroyed. Roar! In the distant sky, the abyss dragon suddenly opened its huge mouth, and a large ball of fire was brewing in its mouth. The next moment, a ball of crimson fireball spewed out of the dragon's mouth. The fireball bombarded Mewtwo with destructive energy. Mewtwo snorted lightly, stretched out his right palm, and a dark vortex appeared in front of him. The fireball spewed out by the magic dragon was absorbed by the black hole vortex in front of Mewtwo the moment it fell down, and there was no sound. Seeing this, the abyss demon dragon shook his body, roared to the sky, opened his mouth and spewed out a series of huge fireballs. The fireballs in the sky fell from the sky like meteorites. In an instant, the huge fireballs like meteors bombarded the ice field where Mewtwo was. The frozen land instantly turned into a boiling sea of fire. The boiling sea of fire also submerged the white figure standing there. The huge body of the magic dragon coiled in the sky, looking down at the ice field engulfed by the sea of fire from a high place. A hint of teasing flashed in his red eyes. However, the next second, a more intense roar came from the sea of fire. I saw a huge demon monster with 2 horns on its head, a fiery red body, and an extremely large body rushing out from the boundless sea of fire. This is the Flame Demon Lord. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 284. Roar. The flame demon's body rushed out of the sea of fire, and the flames around him seemed to be adding strength to him. Without any hesitation, the flame demon opened a pair of devilish wings of flowing fire behind him. Without any hesitation, the flame demon roared and leaped up from the sea of fire, rushing directly towards the abyss dragon in the sky. When the huge flame demon rushed out of the sea of fire with a terrifying momentum, the dragon's eyes flashed with horror. But there was no time to hesitate. The next second the flame demon had moved to the dragon's eyes with a monstrous flame pressure. In an instant, the black and red figures entangled, and the 2 behemoths circled and fought together in the air. The flame demon's fire fist slammed into the dragon's body, and the latter showed a pair of extremely sharp claws and bit towards the flame demon transformed by Mewtwo. Suddenly, the dragon soared in the air, spewing out a large piece of dragon breath from its mouth. The flame demon also released a beam of scorching black flames. In the dim sky, the black and red flames collided with each other. The black flames carrying black gas instantly swallowed up the deep red dragon breath, and in an instant, they blasted towards the direction of the magic dragon. The magic dragon roared, and dark ghosts appeared in the space beside him. The ghosts wailed and floated in front of the abyss dragon. Countless deep ghosts condensed into a hexagram pattern. The scorching black flames bombarded the ghosts in the sky. These ghosts with evil spirits dissipated in an instant. But the hexagram array they condensed became more and more solid. Roar. Another dragon roar, and the hexagram array in front of the magic dragon flashed with a dark black light. The next moment, a terrifying evil spirit with a breath of despair gushed out from the hexagram array. The moment this group of evil spirit emerged, it flashed repeatedly in the space, and in a flash it came to the front of the flame demon. Feel the terrifying destructive power contained in the evil spirit. The flame demon's body shook, and the next second it appeared hundreds of meters away. But then, the group of evil spirits seemed to have life, and it crossed in front of the flame demon at the same time. A gleam of light flashed in the flame demon's eyes, and the rolling black flames condensed into a vortex in front of him, instantly sweeping in the evil spirit that was emitting a shrill ghost cry. At this moment, a cold gust of wind suddenly came from the flame demon's body. The flame demon turned back suddenly, and it was the abyss demon dragon waving its claws to fight. In an instant, the 2 huge monsters in the sky twisted together again. In the process of fighting with this demon dragon monster, Mewtwo, who was controlling the flame demon, had a look of surprise in his eyes. The strength of this demon dragon is definitely not weak, and it can also be called a destructive existence in the real world. In terms of strength alone, this monster is not much different from the 2-faced Buddha demon Wufa who had fought with Mewtwo. But such a destructive existence is actually a boss in this game space. The battle between the magic dragon and the fire demon seemed to release the most primitive instincts of the beasts. Fighting, biting, punching, dragon breath, and the interweaving of flames, only the bodies of two huge monsters could be vaguely seen intertwined. During the battle, the red blood bar on the head of the magic dragon was decreasing very slowly. Even Mewtwo had to admit that the soul alone could not do anything to this monster now. The next moment, the wings behind the magic dragon fluttered, and it instantly moved to the sky above the distant palace. The magic dragon's eyes were deep, and there was a sense of contempt in his red pupils. Another dragon roar shook the whole space. This time, the abyss magic dragon actually exuded a supreme dragon power. Once the dragon power came out, all spirits surrendered. The pressure of the giant dragon made the flame demon stop in its tracks. This demon dragon actually intended to suppress the flame demon with its dragon power. An arrogant sneer appeared in the eyes of the demon dragon. Under the supreme dragon power, any living creature would tremble and crawl. But then, the flame demon blew out a stream of flames from his nose, and a low voice came out of his mouth. "Little bug, let me show you what is a real dragon." At the moment when the flame demon said this, its huge body gushed out a majestic pressure. At the same time, in the hotel building in the real world, Mewtwo, who was operating the soul in the game world, opened his eyes at some point. But at this moment, Mewtwo's eyes were as red as fire. Strands of red energy flowed from Mewtwo's fingertips, turning into soul energy and pouring into the helmet in his hand. However, at this moment, a purple-black box suddenly rose in Mewtwo's arms. The box trembled wildly in the air as if it had life. And Mewtwo seemed to sense the desire of the box, and the deep red in his eyes faded. The next moment, the box of the ghost suddenly opened, and a stream of light flowed into the helmet along the red energy of Mewtwo's fingertips. And the flame demon above the ominous abyss was suddenly wrapped by a large ball of burning flames, forming a cocoon-like ball of light. When the flames burned and boiled, they also blocked the oncoming fierce dragon power. The magic dragon naturally didn't know what happened, but instinctively had a bad premonition. Then, the ghosts of the dead appeared in front of the magic dragon again, turning into a group of gloomy evil spirits and attacking the flame demon. And a ball of dragon's breath of fire also bombarded the flame demon. The ghostly cry of the dead souls and the flames of destruction were about to bombard the fiery red ball of light that enveloped the flame demon. However, just as the dragon's fatal attack was about to arrive, the fireball that enveloped the flame demon's huge body suddenly split apart. Roar! A supreme dragon power that was even more terrifying than the dragon power emitted by the dragon reverberated throughout the space like a thunderous sound. Then, under the horrified eyes of the dragon, a crimson oriental dragon several dozen feet long rose into the sky and coiled in the sky. At the same time, the originally extremely dark sky suddenly became as bright as day. In the endless sea of burning fire in front, a long-haired man slowly walked out. The man was wearing a set of close-fitting red armor, surrounded by black flames, and had a majestic aura. The man's appearance was even more handsome, with the long crimson hair hanging down to his waist. There was an evil smile in his deep eyes that looked down upon the world. What frightened the Abyss Dragon even more was that it actually felt an incomparably pure dragon power from this man. The huge body of the dragon actually began to tremble slightly, and subconsciously wanted to crawl on the ground. This was due to the suppression of bloodline. The next moment, looking at the terrifying evil spirit close at hand, Mewtwo had an indifferent expression. He stretched out his hand and a blood-colored stream of light broke through the space, turning into a strange long sword floating in front of Mewtwo. Demon Sword, Yama. Mewtwo slowly picked up the long sword in front of him, and the blood soul lingered on the sword. The next moment, Mewtwo swung the sword to break through the air, and the evil spirit with the wailing of the dead soul was instantly eaten by the blood soul attached to the long sword. As the evil spirit continued to devour, the strange blood color on the blade became more and more intense. Mewtwo raised the magic sword in his hand, looking at the trembling black dragon in front of him, and raised a playful smile at the corner of his mouth. Now is the time to slay the dragon. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 285. When he saw Mewtwo, who was wearing a candle dragon armor, slowly walking out of the sea of fire, and holding a Yama demon to cut off the evil spirit. The ferocious face of the abyss demonic dragon was filled with a look of surprise. It couldn't figure it out, that huge balrog that was supposed to be annihilated under the evil aura of its dead soul. When did he turn into this red-haired human being? What shocked the demonic dragon even more was that a huge oriental dragon with a deep red body and dozens of feet in length rose up from the sea of fire. The red giant dragon's figure continues to shrink in the air, but the supreme dragon power erupting from its body becomes more and more powerful. The power of this red dragon is even more pure and powerful than that. Immediately afterwards, under the trembling gaze of the demon dragon, the body of the red candle dragon continued to shrink. The figure of the candle dragon coiled around Mewtwo, who was wearing red. Finally, they all merged into the Zilong armor on Mewtwo. At this moment, the deep vertical pupils on the chest of the armor suddenly erupted with a fierce wave. In an instant, destructive pressure mixed with supreme dragon power rippled out. The ghosts in the ominous place were instantly shocked and trembled by the oppressive feeling coming from the depths of their souls. Even the demon sword Yan Mo held in Mewtwo's hand seemed to feel something, the blade trembled and blood flowed. The demon dragon also felt the pressure coming from his bloodline. Without hesitation, the next moment the wings on the back of the abyss dragon flapped, and dragon breath like a dense rain of meteors spewed out from its mouth one after another. The red dragon's breath fell like a meteorite, but Mewtwo stood still. The next second, countless dark black flames emerged from Mewtwo's body, scurrying out like demons from hell. Groups of black flames instantly swallowed up the meteors and fire showers that hit the sky. The hot airflow from the surrounding flames exploded, blowing Mewtwo's dark red hair hanging down to her waist. Immediately afterwards, Mewtwo's figure suddenly moved. The demon dragon's red pupils trembled, but the next second the figure wearing red armor was already close in front of him. Mewtwo was seen holding a bloody demon sword, and the moment it flashed, he swung it towards the head of the demon dragon. The abyss demonic dragon subconsciously raised its claws to resist, but the sharpness of this demonic sword simply exceeded its imagination. Coupled with the unparalleled strange power blessed by Mewtwo himself. In the blink of an eye, a ferocious tear appeared on the demon dragon's claws. This tearing wound continued to spread along the demon dragon's body. Finally, the entire dark arm of the huge dragon body showed a bloody scar. And the red blood bar on the top of the dragon's head instantly dropped by one level. Immediately afterwards, a large amount of blood spurted out like a kite with a broken string. But what's even more terrifying is that the blood flowing out of the demon dragon's arms turned into streams of blood, all of which poured into the strange demon knife in Mewtwo's hand. And with the influx of blood, demon sword seemed to have received some great satisfaction. The blood glow on the blade becomes more and more vivid. On the other hand, the blood bar on the top of the demon dragon's head continues to decrease with the flow of blood. The demon dragon let out a mournful cry, its pupils were shocked, and the pair of wings behind it were about to retreat backwards. It didn't understand what happened to make the human in front of it increase in strength so much. The instinct of seeking good fortune and avoiding evil makes it want to escape from here. But how could Mewtwo let this opportunity pass? Mewtwo's eyes narrowed slightly, and an evil smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The next second, Mewtwo's figure disappeared again, turning into a black flame and disappearing in mid-air. However, the sound of shuttle explosions was frequently heard in the space. The black flames of burning embers of karma kept flashing and moving in the air in the wasteland of the ominous place. No matter how fast the dragon was, the bloodlines on its arms couldn't stop flowing, just like automatic tracking marks. And the black flames of fire moving in the space are chasing after them like sharks smelling the smell of blood. In an instant, a beam of dark red-black flames instantly penetrated the dragon's huge body. A dozen feet away from the demonic dragon, the figure of Mewtwo appeared in mid-air, wearing a candle dragon armor. Her dark red hair was blowing in the wind, the demon knife in her hand was shining with blood, and there was a faint smile on Mewtwo's evil face. I saw him slowly snap his fingers and open and close the corners of his mouth. Bang! The next second, countless crimson cracks like lava appeared on the dragon's huge body. Immediately afterwards, these cracks exploded, and countless balls of hot flames shot out from them, instantly sweeping the entire body of the demon dragon into flames. A large amount of blood surged into the demon sword like a kite with a broken string. And the blood bar on the top of the demon dragon's head is also rapidly dropping to the point of dying. Looking at the demon dragon's body burned by the flames, Mewtwo suddenly remembered something. He stretched out his palm, and the devouring force formed a black hole vortex in front of him. In an instant, the burning demon dragon's body was gradually absorbed by the devouring power. At the same time, Mewtwo could clearly feel a rather strong energy pouring into his body. Can the monsters swallowed in this game world be turned into the energy of the original body? Mewtwo looked thoughtful, but the demon sword in her hand was glowing because it had absorbed a large amount of the blood of the demon dragon. When the demon dragon's body was completely absorbed by the swallowing black hole. However, Mewtwo suddenly discovered that in the process of devouring the dragon boss, the green health bar above his head, which indicated the player, also turned into the red color that belonged to the boss monster. Even the light screen introduction above Mewtwo's head changed its name. Lord of the Abyss, LV. I became the boss. Mewtwo was slightly surprised. He had just entered the game and killed a monster. He had turned from a new player into the ultimate boss of the game. But Mewtwo realized that after becoming the boss of this final level, there was no more information about this game in his mind. It seemed that the server of this so-called game could not affect him, and he could not get any other information about God's domain continent from it. With his eyes narrowed, Mewtwo had already vaguely felt that the world in this game was not that simple. Slowly walking to the white bone wasteland under his feet, Mewtwo's eyes were focused on an item that fell in the wasteland. This was a domineering armor that was completely black and flashed with a cold and dim light. Different from the candle dragon armor that Mewtwo wore. This set of armor is extremely thick, enough to cover a person's entire body. It is inlaid with dragon teeth and claws, and it is shining with a stream of light, looking domineering and ferocious. Dragon armor, quality, destruction level. This is the weapon and equipment dropped by the Abyss Dragon before it was swallowed. It seems that in this game world, the weapons and equipment still continue the level of the real world. Looking at the domineering armor under his feet, he felt the fierce breath coming from it. Mewtwo shook his head slowly. Although this set of armor can be regarded as a treasure, it is still inferior to the Zilong armor on his body in terms of function and protection. Moreover, this kind of equipment in the game obviously cannot be taken to the outside world, and it is quite useless in Mewtwo's hands. However, at this moment, the demon sword in Mewtwo's hand suddenly trembled. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 286. The blood on the blade flickered, as if it was eager for the armor in front of it. Seeing this, Mewtwo let go of the Yama demon sword in his hand. The next moment, the demon sword rushed towards the armor as if it was alive. Countless bloody undead emerged from the blade and pounced on the armor like hungry wolves. The blood soul began to gnaw on the armor with its fangs and claws. And the wailing sound of some kind of beast suddenly came from the domineering and ferocious armor. Immediately afterwards, more blood souls began to emerge from the demon knife and ate crazily towards the weapons scattered on the ground. After a few breaths, the bloody souls in the sky floated back into the demon sword. But the glowing armor turned dim. The cold wind blew by, and the weapons on the ground, including this ferocious-looking armor, instantly turned into a puddle of powder. The demon sword seemed to have gained some satisfaction. The red light on the blade was as red as blood, and the blood flowed back to Mewtwo's hand. Mewtwo looked at the demon knife in his hand, a flash of surprise flashed in his eyes. He remembered that in the real world, this knife did not have the ability to swallow weapons. In this world, this knife actually has the ability to swallow weapons and equipment. Feeling the changes contained in the demon sword, Mewtwo was convinced that this demon sword had completed some kind of advancement. It seems like there are still a lot of secrets hidden in this world. Now, Mewtwo no longer sees this world as just a simple virtual space. Looking at the huge and dark palace behind her, Mewtwo slowly walked in. This time, no monsters stood in the way. Mewtwo could sense that there were countless terrifying monsters underground in this wasteland. But these dead soul monsters were all afraid of Mewtwo's terrifying power and did not dare to show their heads at all. To be precise, after devouring the strongest person in this area. Mewtwo is the final boss of this ominous abyss. The entire hall has a hollow appearance, and the interior is even more dark and terrifying, with a gloomy aura and an evil aura. In the deepest part of the hall, stands a ferocious throne made entirely of skulls and bones. Mewtwo guessed that the Abyss Dragon should also be able to transform into a human form. But before it could transform into a human form, Mewtwo had already devoured it, along with its boss's identity. Mewtwo smiled slightly, and as his footsteps moved, his long dark red hair flowed. The Candle Dragon armor, which is as close to the body as a robe, looks so dazzling in this palace. He walked to the skeleton throne, turned around and sat down slowly. In an instant, the vertical eyes on the chest of the Zilong armor opened again. An unparalleled and ferocious pressure spread from the palace. In an instant, the sky outside the palace, which was as bright as day, turned extremely dark. Vaguely, you can also see a huge dragon hovering above the palace. Immediately afterwards, it seemed to be responding to the powerful dragon's power. In the abyss and wilderness outside the palace, the earth is cracked and a dark wind is blowing. White bones and skeletons rushed out from the depths of the ground, emitting the mournful cries of the deceased, which was eerie and terrifying. Ghosts cry and gods howl, bones and blood souls float in the deepest living forbidden zone, as if they are welcoming their new king. At this moment, Mewtwo became the master of the forbidden land for creatures known as the ominous abyss. Lord of the Abyss. At the same time, there was another human base thousands of kilometers away. In the center of the city stands a luxurious villa. Miss, this is the latest technological equipment of Zilan Base, the spiritual linkage device. In a girl's boudoir in the villa. An old man who looked like a butler hunched over and handed a helmet in his hand to the girl in front of him. Uncle Fu, can you really enter another world after wearing it? Yafanyan stared at the virtual helmet in his hand, his eyes flashing with brilliance. Even in her world, such fantastic technological products do not exist. The old man known as Fu Bo nodded. This device has been used by high-level officials in many bases. The master has also sent technicians to inspect it and can confirm that there is no danger in it. The spiritual linkage device, a technological device beyond human imagination that can enter the virtual world, has appeared. Naturally, it has also entered the vision of other high-level people in human bases. www. It's just that unlike ordinary survivors in Zilan Base, what these base executives see is on another level. This virtual game was developed by Zilan Base. It allows human consciousness and spirit to enter the virtual world to fight. And he won't be injured or killed in the battle. Although the objects of these battles are all false. but the experience and understanding accumulated in the battle are all real. As a result, many human bases have invested their younger generations in the virtual world to hone their skills. The purpose is to allow these young generations who are pampered and protected in the base to grow up as quickly as possible in the temper of battle. The master said that your powers have just awakened, miss. I hope you can adapt to the surge of energy in your body as soon as possible. So I specially asked the old man to fetch the linkage device from the trading warehouse and give it to the lady. After speaking, Uncle Fu informed Yefanyan of the specific usage method. Recently, the entire base has been madly saying that the eldest daughter of the Ye family has changed her temperament since she experienced the danger of the ruins. Her personality is no longer crazy and willful, and even her supernatural talent has improved by leaps and bounds overnight, as if she were helped by God. I know, thank you, Uncle Fu. Yefanyan nodded slightly and sent the elderly housekeeper away. After the housekeeper left, Yefanyan fiddled with the mental linkage device the size of a motorcycle helmet beside the bed, with curiosity in her eyes. She never thought that there would be such magical technological equipment in this time and space. Even in her world, there was no such advanced technology. This surprising discovery made her guess about this world even more confused. When her thoughts were confused, Yefanyan looked up at the mirror in front of her. In the mirror was a rather delicate and beautiful face, but it was destroyed by a narrow and hideous scar. And Yefanyan put her jade hand close to the mirror, her eyebrows slightly frowned. She could clearly feel that the hideous scar on her face was gradually fading. What surprised her even more was that her appearance was slowly approaching her original self in another time and space. With a myriad of thoughts in her mind, Yefanyan knew that the most important thing now was to adapt her body to the skyrocketing superpowers. In the end times, strength is always the most important thing. With this thought in mind, Yefanyan opened the helmet of the mental linkage device according to the method taught by Uncle Fu. Then she put on the helmet and lay flat on the big bed in the bedroom. Holding the dark green jade pendant on her chest, Yefanyan silently said, "Mental linkage device, login." Then Yefanyan's eyes fell into darkness. After an unknown amount of time, a gentle female voice suddenly sounded in Yefanyan's ears. "Dear Awakener, welcome to the Divine Realm continent. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord." Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 287. Located underground at the junction of the central area of Zilan Base and the civilian area. A man wearing an open coat and a half-grown boy led Mu Qiu and Lu Qianqian. Walking in an underground base surrounded by silver metal steel. Looking at the silver and iron walls around me that are becoming more and more technological, there is still white light emitting from them. Although Mu Qiu already knew this, she still nodded with admiration in her eyes. After Lu Qianqian secretly followed Mao Yuming back to the headquarters of the resistance army that day, she also informed Mu Qiu of this information. What is unimaginable is that the passage into the resistance headquarters is actually located in an underground pipe at the junction of the central area and the slums. As Mu Qiu expected, the day after Luo Ziyuan returned to the headquarters, he went to the hotel in the civilian area to pick up Mu Qiu and the two of them. After all, no matter it is Lu Qianqian, an S-level powerful awakener. Or maybe it's Mu Qiu who is carrying the lost sacred object, the box of monsters. The weight of both has to be taken seriously by this resistance organization that is in urgent need of strength. Walking through a passage made of some kind of silver metal, Mu Qiu could feel that this iron-like silver passage was emitting some unique electromagnetic light waves. He guessed that this silver wall should have the function of isolating detection. Luo Ziyuan, who was walking in front, turned to look at Mu Qiu and explained. "This is the tunnel leading to our headquarters. Because it is built in the sewer, no one will notice it." The young man Mao Yuming on the side echoed. Yes, yes, those idiots in the combat troops thought that our headquarters would be built in a slum. They searched openly and covertly for a long time but still couldn't find the location of our headquarters. Lu Qianqian asked, then no one usually searches these sewers. Mao Yuming shook his finger with a proud look on his face. There is a special anti-reconnaissance device outside the headquarters, and we will report any situation at any time. And the ones that usually enter the sewers are basically cleaning robots. It couldn't be easier to fool those mindless machines. Obviously, the rebels cleverly adopted the dark under the light strategy. The headquarters was deliberately built on the edge of the central area. The peripheral members of the resistance are usually hidden among the crowds in the central area or civilian areas. Most people still don't know the specific location of the headquarters. While talking, Luo Ziyuan had already led several people deep into the passage. Several people once passed by a large room with the door open, and the sound of welding and disassembling parts could be heard from inside. After hearing the sound, I saw tall gray and black mechas standing in the space inside the gate. A short, bald man was busy disassembling parts in front of a mecha. Next to him were a group of maintenance personnel helping him up and down. This is Tony. His superpower is mechanical transformation. After the equipment and weapons in the resistance are damaged, he will lead the technical department to repair them. After a brief greeting, Luo Ziyuan took a few more people and moved on. During this period, many well-equipped resistance fighters passed by in the silver passage illuminated by white light. Holding a firearm, he was in such a hurry that he didn't even have time to pay attention to Mu Qiu and his party. Seeing this, Luo Ziyuan explained, the resistance has established branches throughout the base to transmit and receive intelligence. These branches are always at risk of being destroyed by patrol forces, and we must always be prepared to respond to friendly forces. Mu Qiu nodded, and it could be seen that the resistance army had tried their best to compete with the senior officials of Zilan base. After a while, several people came to a mechanical door deep underground. Luo Ziyuan was seen aiming his pupils at the detection screen next to the door. After the green pass signal flashed on the screen, he pressed the palm print again. With a boom, the door slowly rose from bottom to top. When Mu Qiu and Lu Qianqian walked in, they were shocked to find that what appeared inside the door was a scene of a battle command room. The walls are covered with surveillance screens on all sides. Various weird scientific research equipment are placed on the console, and in the middle is a table similar to a conference room. There are already several figures in the command room at this moment, sitting around as if discussing some plan. Mu Qiu noticed that these people had different shapes. Some are awakened ones with supernatural powers, some are transformed half-orcs, and some are ordinary humans with mediocre strength. Among them was a woman like Ah Xing, whom Mu Qiu had met before. When he saw Luo Ziyuan and Mu Qiu walking in, the figures sitting together immediately stood up from the table. Luo Ziyuan took the lead in introducing. This is Brother Qiu and Miss Lu that I mentioned to you before. Luo Ziyuan then pointed to a small figure on the high platform of the round table. This is the leader of our resistance army and an outstanding scientist at the Zilan base, Professor Zhou Yi. What Mu Qiu didn't expect was that the leader of the resistance was actually the palm-sized villain in front of him. I saw this palm-sized weirdo in front of the high platform with a slender body and purple skin. Wearing a white tight-fitting suit, his head is shaped like an inverted triangle. The limbs are covered with frog-like webs, which looks quite weird. Just as Luo Ziyuan finished speaking, this weirdo called Professor Zhou jumped to the front of the high platform and waved to Mu Qiu and the others. "Hello you guys." A strange baby voice came from Professor Zhou's mouth, and it sounded like a child of several years old was saying hello. "Hello." Lu Qianqian reacted and politely returned her hand, with a smile on her face. This is really different from the image of the Legion leader she imagined, either old and calm, or a tough guy. It seemed that she saw the forcedness of Lu Qianqian's smile. One of the rough-looking yellow-haired men grinned and said, "Don't underestimate Professor Zhou. The box weapons in the base were originally developed by his organization." "What?" Lu Qianqian looked at the palm-sized dwarf in front of her with a surprised expression. Professor Joe, who was regarded as a dwarf, did not care about this. Instead, he focused his attention on a purple black box hanging on Mewtwo's chest. "Can you show it to me?" Professor Joe stood up on tiptoes and pointed at the box of monsters hanging on Mewtwo's chest. With a smile on her face, Mewtwo didn't shy away and handed the box of monsters directly to Professor Joe at the table. The people around were all staring at the purple box with strange patterns in Mewtwo's hand. This is a destructive level weapon, enough to stand side by side with the sacred objects of their base. Professor Joe held the purple box that was as big as its body and fiddled with it for a while. Lucian also took this opportunity to raise her own doubts. "You just invited us in, and you're not afraid of any problems with us?" The rough-looking man with yellow hair pointed at the screen behind him and said with a smile, "Sister, don't expect you to come in so easily. But from the moment you stepped into the passage of the headquarters, you were subject to all-round surveillance and investigation. As long as there is a slight movement, it will be immediately surrounded by magnetic signals throughout the headquarters, ensuring that not a single hair can be transmitted out. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord." Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 288. After saying this, Asin glared at the yellow-haired man. "Jinqiang, don't talk nonsense." The unkempt yellow-haired man called Jinqiang laughed and said, "Don't worry too much, these are necessary protective measures. We never dare to invite ordinary people into the headquarters." Mewtwo nodded, not caring much. The moment he entered the passage, he felt the surveillance magnetic field. But this was all within his expectations. Besides, if he wanted to understand the situation of the space more deeply, he had to start with these rebels. The conversation also gave Mewtwo a preliminary understanding of the inside of this rebel army. The figures in front of him were the main backbone of this rebel army. The rebel army was also divided into several teams, with special captains leading the team to perform tasks. Like Luo Ziyuan, he was the leader of one of the teams. And the yellow-haired man called Jinqiang was also the captain of another team. There are very few truly awakened people in these teams, and most of them are ordinary humans who have suffered oppression. It is precisely because of the gathering of these humans who hate Zilan base in their hearts that formed the resistance army that is now openly against the top leaders of the base. During the conversation, Professor Joe in front of the table looked at the bloody lines on the box, raised his head and said, "How is Duan Mucheng?" It seems that Professor Joe is quite familiar with Duan Mucheng. Mewtwo narrowed his eyes slightly. "Maybe, he is dead." Professor Joe sighed lightly, "You will not live if you do evil." "From what you said, it seems that you are very familiar with Duan Mucheng," Mewtwo asked. Professor Joe put his hands behind his back, and a sense of vicissitudes appeared on his weird face, and his pupils were deep. "The ruler of this Zilan base is called Duan Muchen." "Duan Muchen?" Mewtwo looked thoughtful, but he heard Professor Joe continue to speak. "Duan Muchen is Duan Mucheng's brother." Professor Joe's eyes were filled with reminiscence. "Brother Duan Mu and I are close friends, and we are also famous scientific lunatics. I like to study mechanical technology, while Brother Duan Mu is good at genetic science. After the outbreak of the apocalypse, Brother Duan Mu and I joined forces with several scientists to use supernatural energy to develop high-tech equipment such as box weapons. At first, these technological equipment did save the humans in Zilan base, and we were also elected as leaders. But later, Duan Mu and his partner targeted those innocent ordinary humans for the experiment." Mewtwo stared at Zhou Yi's short body. He knew that this might be the origin of the conflict between Zilan base and the resistance army. The first thing that was exposed was Duan Mucheng's use of human blood and souls to refine box weapons, which aroused public outrage in the base for a time, and the Duan Mu brothers immediately became the target of public criticism. Later, under the joint condemnation of everyone, we expelled Duan Muqing from the Zilan base. And Duan Muchen also fell silent. We thought that the matter would come to an end, but unexpectedly. Just 2 months later, Duan Muchen actually joined forces with those cult members to occupy the base. When Professor Joe said this, his expression froze, and even his baby voice became extremely low. This damn bastard traitor. The rough-faced yellow-haired man Jin Qiang showed resentment on his face. Mu Qiu immediately understood something. Here, they call it the holy religion. Professor Joe nodded slowly. Here, they call it the holy religion. Duan Muchen quickly gained control of the Zilan base with the help of the heterogeneous cult. Those scientists who refused to obey orders were ruthlessly killed, and even I was lucky enough to survive with the help of Xiu Wen. After escaping, we joined forces with those who were unwilling to obey the brutal rule to establish the current organization that resisted the Zilan high level. And this is the origin of the resistance army. I didn't expect that there was a story of brothers fighting against each other. After listening to the story taught by Professor Joe, Mu Qiu found it quite interesting. The Zilan base has the ability not to clean up the zombie monsters outside. On the contrary, the internal struggle for power change was staged in the base, which is really sighing. Luo Ziyuan then said, "Brother Qiu, regarding your cousin's matter, our resistance army has been searching the base according to the clues you provided. We will notify you immediately as soon as we have information." Luo Ziyuan's idea is very simple. Although the resistance army values the abilities of Lu Qianqian and Mu Qiu, but they also know that they can't be hasty to win them over, so they try to lend a hand to absorb Mu Qiu and the others into the resistance army. Mu Qiu nodded, "Then I'll trouble you all." That being said, he didn't think the resistance army could find the missing Shueqianya. At this moment, Ah Xing suddenly looked at the surveillance screen and said, "It's the lone wolf is back." Everyone looked up and saw a tall figure walking into the passage in the surveillance. As the picture zoomed in, the tall figure was a muscular man wearing a dark vest. The man had a strong body, a capable short black hair, and a deep scar at the corner of his eye. The man was dragging behind him a man in tight combat clothes. After a while, the sturdy man called Lone Wolf opened the door of the headquarters command room and dragged the unconscious man in. Lone Wolf walked into the command room, looked at everyone and said calmly, "The intelligence has been found out. The other party will act tonight, and the location is T3 block in the central area." Jin Qiang angrily scolded, "Why did you bring people back from outside again? What if the location of the base is leaked?" Hearing Jin Qiang's question, the corner of Lone Wolf's mouth suddenly raised. "Oh. Sorry." The sound of claws slashing across the sky sounded, and a large pool of blood suddenly splashed in the air. A flash of blood flashed on the box of the ghost box. And the faces of everyone changed. The muscles on the shoulder of the Lone Wolf bulged, his hands became claws, and he tore the unconscious soldier behind him in half. Only then did everyone realize that the vest on the Lone Wolf was actually stained red by blood. As the bloody bodies of the soldiers were scattered, cleaning robots immediately cleaned up the scene. Although everyone was surprised, they seemed to be used to it and were not shocked. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 289. Luo Ziyuan frowned slightly and introduced to Lone Wolf. "This is Brother Qiumu and Miss Lu." When Lone Wolf heard the word Qiumu, his eyes suddenly glanced at the purple box in Mu Qiu's hand, and his pupils trembled slightly. Lone Wolf glanced at Mu Qiu again, his eyes deep, and then looked at everyone. There is also a Fenglan Knight leading the team this time, so be prepared. After saying that, he left everyone with a lonely figure and slowly left. Ah Sing looked at Mu apologetically and explained. Lone Wolf was originally an alien human, but he was later captured and subjected to inhumane human experiments. This led to a drastic change in his temperament. Don't be surprised. Mu smiled lightly and played with the box in her hand. What a rebellious lone wolf. Luo Ziyuan suddenly looked at Mu and said. Tonight we have a raid on a biochemical factory. There may be news about two relatives in it. Are you interested? Luo Ziyuan was very good at calculating. Different from ordinary awakened people, in their eyes. Mu who possesses the sacred object the box of monsters, and Lu Qianqian, who is already powerful. Even the rebels who are not attached to them can still live a prosperous life. Therefore, without knowing the attitude of the two men, the resistance army decided to express their attitude and slowly win over them. Mu naturally saw the rebels' intentions, but he didn't care. One of our rebel comrades was captured by the combat troops and will be sent to the biochemical base. And another reason why we gathered together today is to discuss a plan to rescue our companions. The biochemical factory's database also contains some data on human beings who have been transformed. Maybe it can bring you some help. Mu smiled. In this case, we have to look at your army's methods. After Mu and the two left under the leadership of Mao Yuming. Jin Jiang, a tall man with yellow hair and a seemingly unkempt face, suddenly looked at the palm-sized villain in front of the round table. Professor, how are you? The little man with purple skin blinked his pea-sized pupils and said in a baby voice. How about what? What's for dinner tonight? As night falls, what is different from the bustling technological scene during the day is. At this moment, Zilan base has become extremely quiet, and there are very few people on the streets. Only patrol machines can be seen going back and forth. The residential area is even more dim, with little light visible. In these areas where ordinary humans live, even the use of electricity by humans without privileges is strictly restricted. Only in the center of the base, a paradise for awakened people and transformed mutants, can one still vaguely see the flickering lights on some high-rise buildings. The whole city fell into silence. Whether they are humans or awakened ones, as soon as night falls, they will all put on helmet-like mental linkage devices. Entering the virtual game world is tantamount to starting their second life. Only in the game world can they feel a sense of long-lost equality. Theoretically, they can get everything they want in this virtual world. In a fenced-in chemical plant near the edge of the central district. The chemical plant was built in an industrial park in the original city, with few buildings around it. On weekdays, no one dares to approach the surrounding area, which is a real no man's land in the base. After Duanmuchin took over control of Zilan base, many chemical factories for human genetic experiments have been rebuilt in uninhabited areas like this. The high-rise chemical building with searchlights flashing at the top is one of the biochemical sites where human experiments are conducted at Zilan base. Searchlights and monitors scan the area for miles around. There are also tall patrol robots constantly probing around, making it look like a heavily guarded fortress. At this moment, we are at the entrance of the biochemical factory. Giant trucks made of welded iron rods slowly drove in through the passage opened in the fence. What is surprising is that through the cracks in the iron rod, you can vaguely see. The trucks were actually carrying human beings with ragged clothes and ashen faces. These humans range in age and gender. But everyone was sitting in the car with their knees clasped, their eyes showing the look of despair before death. There are tall combat robots on both sides of the truck to guard it. The mechanical arms are connected with cannon barrels, and they will attack without hesitation if there is any abnormality. Following these trucks were several trucks several times taller. The surfaces of these trucks were covered with a thick layer of metal, and there were faint sounds of knocking and banging inside. Different from the previous trucks, these modified trucks carry an awakened person with supernatural powers. Some of these humans are prisoners who have violated the laws of the base, and some are captured peripheral members of the resistance. On both sides of the trucks where the awakened were imprisoned, there are more mechas and human figures wearing combat troops. A tall mecha with a sharp head, a huge body, and two huge sharp blades on its arms stood near the entrance. The head of the mecha glowed purple, staring at the trucks carrying humans entering the factory. In a dark alley a few kilometers away from the biochemical factory, a cylindrical telescope radiated faint energy fluctuations. Through the telescope, a man was observing everything outside the biochemical factory. "It's the Fenglin Knight." When the man saw the mecha with purple arms, he immediately exclaimed. Luo Ziyuan, who had been waiting for a long time, frowned slightly when he heard this. He took the modified telescope from the man and looked into the distance. After a moment, Luo Ziyuan said slowly with a solemn tone. "The 8th Knight of Fenglin, Kama Idaki." As soon as these words came out, the many figures ambushing in the dark alley suddenly calmed down. Muqiu looked down at the messy-haired boy beside him. The latter understood immediately and explained in a low voice. Zilan Base once devoted all its efforts to creating 3 destructive-level holy relics. The remaining resources were used to make 8 powerful S-level box weapons, which were given to 8 loyal warriors. These 8 warriors each led a combat unit to defend the safety of Zilan Base. And these 8 warriors with the strongest box weapons under the holy relics are known as the 8 Knights of Fenglin. Muqiu suddenly remembered He Anping and Zhang Kaili who had visited Yuhei Base before. It seems that these 2 people are also the captains of some combat unit. 8 Knights of Fenglin? It seems a bit weak. Thinking of the performance of these 2 in the Battle of Redemption, Muqiu commented in his heart. "WWW. A Seeing, who was holding a weapon, said fearfully. This Sikalotaki is the captain of the 5th combat unit, and the box weapon he possesses is the mecha with the same name. This S-class mecha is extremely fast, and the sharp blades on its arms can cut through anything. It is coated with a deadly poison that kills people instantly. Ordinary awakeners are not easily its opponents. I'm afraid our operation this time will be a bit troublesome. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord." Author, MOCNU. Chapter 290. It looks really powerful. A light smile appeared on Muqiu's face, and there was no hint of nervousness. These Fenglin Knights have hunted down so many of our companions. Many operations were ruined by these damn knights. Many of the rebels had their heads lowered. The moment they saw Knight Fenglin, their morale had dropped by half. "You fart." Jin Qiang, who has a bad temper, suddenly said something dirty, and then said another sentence. "Princes, generals, and prime ministers would rather have the seed. So what about Fenglin Knight? Some time ago, a base was also replaced by a human organization. I heard that some kind of dynasty was established. They can do it, why can't we?" Jin Qiang had a look of indignation on his face, almost as if he hated iron. Puff. Lu Qianqian on the side couldn't help but blush, and almost laughed out loud. Muqiu rolled her eyes at her, and the latter immediately covered her mouth obediently and stopped making any sound. "Shh." Luo Ziyuan suddenly fell silent and raised his wrist. The bracelet on it flashed a faint fluorescence. "Get ready for action." Immediately afterwards, a rustling sound came from the dark alley. I saw these rebels taking out props such as hoods and masks from their arms and wearing them on their faces. This is an essential link to prevent being caught by patrol robots and surveillance cameras. Luo Ziyuan took out a clown mask and put it on his face, and then took out 2 animal masks and handed them to Muqiu and Lu Qianqian. Muqiu shook her head and refused with a smile. "Mask. I happen to have one." After Luo Ziyuan put on the mask, his original serious face was replaced by a funny clown, which really made people laugh. I saw Luo Ziyuan holding his hands behind his back, holding the black iron heavy sword on his back, and his eyes were sharp under the mask. Get started. Following an order, a deafening blast of cannon suddenly came from the distant attic. Boom! Countless red laser cannons shot out of the air. It instantly bombarded the fence surrounding the biochemical laboratory building. In an instant, holes were blasted out of the solid fence made of unknown metal. Immediately afterwards, large groups of rebels wearing different clothes emerged from all directions. I saw these rebels holding laser guns and carrying artillery fire on their shoulders. Launch an indiscriminate and crazy offensive against the mechas surrounding the passage. What's going on? It's a rebel attack. Alert, alert, attack signal detected, counterattack immediately according to instructions. The patrol robots around the entrance instantly gave prepared action instructions. The tail flames spewed out from under your feet, and the mechanical arms cannon exploded, launching a counterattack against the resistance forces attacking from all sides. Immediately afterwards, the ground in the darkness in the distance shook. Resistance mechas came galloping over, holding guns and fighting countless robots. In an instant, a war between humans and robots is about to begin. The roar of gold and iron clashing and mechanical explosions could be heard frequently in the dark night. The sky was lit up by explosions of fire. The deafening sound of artillery fire is endless. I saw Luo Ziyuan leading a group of masked rebels to join the battle group immediately. Some rebel fighters carried destructive artillery on their shoulders and squatted down in rows at the edge of the battlefield. Immediately pull the trigger in an instant and launch fierce artillery fire on the battlefield. Some awakened ones with supernatural powers took out the box from their waist and took out the crystal core ring and embedded it in it. Open the box. As streams of light of different colors flashed by, many strange weapons emitting supernatural energy suddenly appeared in the hands of these awakened ones. In an instant, these awakened ones holding weapons boxes joined the fierce battle. Luo Ziyuan pulled out the dark iron heavy sword from behind, inserted the crystal core key into the hilt, and shouted, "Thunder, open the box." In an instant, auroras splashed across the ape, thunder and lightning flashed. The simple sword body turned into a scabbard and was thrown aside, replaced by a thunder and lightning sword whose entire body was entangled with arcs. Luo Ziyuan held a thunder sword and shuttled among the tall robots at high speed. These robots became extremely clumsy in Luo Ziyuan's eyes, and were instantly entangled by destructive lightning and bombarded into a pile of scrap metal. On the other side, the lone wolf also destroyed many guard robots with one person. The lone wolf roared angrily, and a wild wolf-like howl came from his mouth. Immediately afterwards, the hair on the lone wolf's body grew like crazy, and its size quickly increased several times, with sharp teeth and scarlet eyes. In the blink of an eye, the lone wolf transformed into a standing werewolf with a body as tall as a mecha. What is different from ordinary mutant awakeners is that some parts of lone wolf's body have been replaced by machines. Iron armor appeared at the joints of the soles of the feet, the right arm was replaced by a machine gun barrel, and the left hand turned into a tearing steel claw. The violent aesthetics that combine technology and wildness are revealed all over his body. The lone wolf entered the battlefield, but his tall flesh and blood body was braver than those mechas. The right arm's light cannon fired, and the left claw tore through the steel armor. Everywhere it passed was a piece of scrap metal, like a battlefield killing god. The dark factory located on the border of the central zone has suddenly turned into a battlefield of the century where machines and humans clash. At the same time, at the top of a tall building a few kilometers away, the night was deep, and the aftermath of the moonlight reflected two figures on the top of the building. "Sir, shall we intervene now?" Lu Qianqian stood beside Mu Qiu, looking at the fierce battle below, and said softly. Mu Qiu, on the other hand, raised the corners of her mouth slightly, looking calm, without any sign of urgency. He stretched out his fingers to make a silent gesture. "There's no rush, let them fight first." Mu Qiu would never do anything without any benefit. Looking at the battlefield in the distance, Mewtwo played with the purple monster box in her hand. Feeling the bloody evil energy contained in it, it seems that some terrifying existence will break out of the box in the next second. Squinting his eyes slightly, he wanted to do an experiment to confirm his thoughts. Mewtwo suddenly raised the box, and with the thought, a flash of blood flashed in the single eye engraved on the box body. Then there was only a whoosh sound, and a black light burst out from the box, faintly carrying the cry of the dead soul to the palm of Mewtwo's hand. What appeared in Mewtwo's hand was a dark black demon mask. This is the Shura mask that once terrified countless people. At the beginning, it was the location of the soul attached to the ghost General Nagia in the Ghost Corps. Mewtwo looked at the ferocious-looking black mask in her hand with a calm expression. The red color on the mask has faded, replaced by an extremely deep and pitch-black color. Even the appearance of the mask has undergone some changes. It is less domineering and more ferocious that makes the bones tremble. You can still faintly hear the cries of ghosts and howls coming from inside. As the demon sword Yama swallowed up the armor exploded by the demon dragon in the ominous abyss. While the demon sword's ability has been greatly improved, the monster box where it lives has also been upgraded. Today's monster box can not only store other equipment besides the demon sword. You can also use the evil soul in your own blood evil space to nourish your equipment. Coupled with Mewtwo's ability to give souls to dead objects through the soul fruit. This gives us the new ability of the upgraded Phantom Box. Forge a Horcrux.